Well, hello, and welcome to my cellar again. You know, cellars are funny things. In the summer, they're cool, and in the winter, they're warm. But in the between times, they're very contrary. We had our cellar basement so nice and warm, and then we got that warm spell. And that warm spell drives the cold in through the concrete walls. So it's colder than hell down here right now. And yet, it's above freezing outdoors in the witching hour. Got a few odd things to talk on tonight. Today, tomorrow, whenever it is you watch. This is number 161. Okay, this is talking about a question from last week. I love when you noted, Tim, that everyone had to have first edition hardcovers. So true. I remember waiting to save up enough money to run down to the bookstore to get the next hardcover. I also remember when the Monster Manual 2 and my personal favorite, the Fiend Folio, came out. How did MM2 and FF come about? Okay, yeah, that's part of the reason we spaced them out is it made it easier for us to pay for them, and we also knew you could save up enough money in the meantime to go buy the next one. I don't know anything about Monster Manual 2. That was compiled after I left. Fiend Folio, on the other hand, in my opinion, is the silliest book put out. Now, it's my understanding that Fiend Folio was an obligation that TSR had to White Dwarf. And I was the U.S. distributor for White Dwarf, which was a major league pain in the ass getting that stuff through customs, because I think it had to come through Canada first because it was, Commonwealth. And anyway, I believe that one of the contract agreements was that at some point in time we were going to allow, we being TSR, we're going to allow the English branch to put out a book of their own so they could make money from it and be part of the distribution deal and feel like one of the guys. Guys, again, being the generic term I use for all the sexes. All right. So apparently, the TSR got their feet put to the fire, and they had to put out the Fiend Folio. And again, this is just my opinion, and I understand there's cultural differences between our two cultures and our two countries. But I think some of the silliest stuff was in the Fiend Folio. Again, just my opinion. I never cared for it. I never owned it. I looked through it. The thing that offends me the most is the flumph. Anyway, that's my understanding. Monster Manual 2 came out after I left. I would imagine that it was another let's make some more money gig. The Blooms got addicted to that kind of shit. Okay, when two magical weapons are used against each other, a small chance of unintended magical potentiality should be invoked. For example, they cancel each other out. They cause a magical explosion. They swap powers. They heal instead of damage. What say you? All right, let's look at this for a minute. Magical sword hits a magical shield. Should they explode? Should the sword now absorb damage every time that it's struck so that the wielder never gets any up to a certain point? I don't know. If you wanted, I could see a circumstance that if you wanted a certain couple of items to have that ability to cancel each other out or something, fine. However, I feel it's only fair to the players to have a bit of lore, or something that allows for that possibility, so they don't get their two neat magic items and nerf them both. Okay, I don't think that'd be fair. We'll talk more about fairness later. Swap power. I mean, you can have some fun with that. No doubt about it. You could definitely have some fun with it. But I wouldn't make it a thing that happens very often. It'd be more of a one-off, or a one-off only once in a very long time. Just my opinion. Okay, here we go with a nitpicker. If hit points represent the ability to avoid the fatal blow, what conception should be used for damage dealt to inanimate stationary objects? That is, doors, statues. Well, hit them with a hammer and you're going to chip them at the very least, and you might bust them. Hit a stone pillar with your sword. That might not be good for your sword. Therefore, not a good thing to think about doing. I mean, come on. Yeah, there's a statue. It doesn't move. You swing, you hit it. That's automatic. That's like killing the thing that's unconscious on the ground. It's automatic. As far as damage, that's entirely up to the DM. You got a warhammer and you're swinging it against something. You take the warhammer's damage capabilities, you look at the strength of the wielder, and you make a ruling. You want to bust that door down, it's going to take, a couple, 3 hits, whatever. You make a ruling. Maybe it takes 2, maybe it takes 3. Busting up inanimate objects is not anything that even needs a die roll except for damage. You may think it's easy to hit that door jamb that you're trying to chop out, but if you've ever done any time in the woods with an axe, not every blow lands true until you're very, very good at it. We burned wood in a wood stove for several years, and I chopped the hell out of trees and split wood, but I gotta say that not every one of mine hit exactly where I wanted to every time. It just doesn't happen unless you're a pro. All right, and what about hitting inanimate moving objects, chariots or mine carts? Well, I think a mine cart doesn't go very fast, so I don't imagine that would be all that hard. Now, if a chariot was bearing down on you at full speed, and you were standing there trying to, for whatever reason, hit a chariot with your sword or your axe or, whatever, I wouldn't make that necessarily an automatic hit. I'd make the wielder roll a 20 and see if they, rolled real low. I don't do fumbles, but I could certainly do misses. You just, just a hair too slow. It happens to everybody. But that's just the way I would. And hit points would be the damaging capability of your weapon. A sword is not going to do much of anything to a stout wooden carved pillar or stone pillar, for instance, or an oaken door jam frame, whatever. It's just not going to do much. It's not designed for that. Whereas an axe or a hammer, they're designed to be impact weapons. Swords are made to be piercing or slicing. I played AD&D 2E last week. The boulet ate my horse. Thanks, Tim. You're welcome. Nothing like being afoot, huh? My question this week is, in the early days of TSR, did you guess that D&D would be so heavily house ruled? In 25 years, I've never played a game of D that had no house rules. We knew that people could not resist doing it. That's why in the introductions to the books, that it said if you want to change something, do it. Feel free, whatever. Now Gary got up on a high horse a couple of times about and he got preachy about if you don't play rules as written, you're not playing first edition AD&D. You're playing OD&D. Okay, I play OD&D. That's fine. And in that sense, he makes the point of if you're going to enter a tournament and the rules are AD&D, then expect it as rules as written. If you're going to sit down at somebody's game, or you're going to sit down at your home game or whatever, then expect that there will be some rules variations. A couple of weeks ago, I talked about the guy that put up this really obnoxious list of. Oh, okay. I'm backwards. It confuses me all the time. Put up this really obnoxious list of rules for playing at his table. Well, again, the general house rules are what should be printed up and presented to new players so that they know. For instance, in my Wheel of Blame games, and in the way I would run otherwise OD&D games today, I don't play that clerics say spells. I play that clerics say prayers. Now, they've only got so much juice stored up each day to be able to say so many prayers of a certain potency, if you will, the levels, okay? And by the same token, if they wish to, if they've already used, for instance, in my NP pre-gens, he has 2 firsts and 2 seconds. And if he's prayed his 2 firsts and wants to use the second slot, a second level prayer slot, he can. He doesn't get 2, he gets 1. So basically, he's limited to 4 prayers, but he doesn't have to pre-pick them. That's a significant house rule. I should tell players that before they start. If I was starting up a new game, this is the way it. Now, who wants to be a cleric? And all of a sudden, clerics with their smashing and hack and bashing weapon allowances and don't have to pre-commit. Wow, they become really tough. They can bless the party 4 times that way. Of course, they can't. Anyway, that's the way I would house rule it, and that's, I think, would be something you need to explain to new players, that this is a significant difference. It, in my opinion, greatly aids the party, and I'm okay with greatly aiding the party because I'm going to give them stiff tests to begin with. And we'll talk more about stiff tests versus sadism later on. But yeah, we knew there would be house rules. In the beginning, we knew that people were playing with spell points and many other things that we weren't fond of. And no, I don't remember a lot of them. I just know there were some. Spell points being the biggest one, and variations on hit points and stuff. But we knew it was going to happen. It's the nature of the beast. People adapt and modify. How many of you come from the board game community, or the simple cards like Naval War and Nuclear War and that? Those games got modified to all the heck. The second edition of Naval War that was put out by Avalon Hill I edited and redeveloped the game and put in all the house rules that the guys I was playing games with back in the day had come up with, because we played it just about every week as a warm-up game, waiting for the last couple of guys to show up. Didn't mod nuclear war very much, but we modded the heck out of naval war. And that's what I meant to say if I said it earlier. Nuke war. It's naval war. The Avalon Hill little blue box. And it's full of house rules that became the optional rules. And I felt, and we felt as a group, that we greatly expanded on a simple, easy, no-brain card game into something that had a little more fun and some strategy. So we made up fleet rules and stuff like that. Board gamers made house rules when rules were unclear. And oh Lord, there were enough of those. And house rules became what the two players could agree on. Okay, we'll do it like this from now on. Minis players house ruled. Because again, you cannot possibly envision every single possible combination of factors that could come up in the middle of a game. You can do a good job of getting most of them, but you won't get them all. And so, oh, well, the rules don't exactly cover that. A house rule would be made up there. Both players agree. And more often than not, it became the rule from then on. If that circumstance ever happened again, pardon me. Okay, Tim, in a magical world without the scientific, I'm going to use the word background of our world, what magic artifacts would cultures most likely create to improve poor sight? Magical masks, or perhaps nose piercings that present the infused magic item close to the area of effect? Any ideas? Well, yeah, if you want to pierce your nose so you see better, that's fine. But primitive cultures have been using magnifiers since long before they understood the refraction of light in whatever. A piece of clear quartz. Oh, look, the detail on that bowl is bigger when I use it. That's good enough for me, particularly with eyesight. Just something you look through. Like that French thing, with two of them on a stick, lagniappe, whatever that is. It's French spelling, French word. Anyway, a monocle. There's some indications that the Aztecs understood magnifying crystals, and that perhaps some of their scribes who painted their amazing picture books that the ignorant, slimy Catholic priests burned because they thought they were heathen images, and instead they were the history of a people. Anyway, there's evidence that they used magnifying crystals on a loop like a monocle. That's all I'd need. A clear piece of quartz ensorcelled with a clear seeing spell. Bingo! Your eyesight's restored. Think, meld, amalgamate, come up with ideas based on real world. Okay, what is it like to edit Scientific Barbarian, and are you reading other publications in this genre as part of your process? If so, what? If so, what so? How do they fare? It's fun doing Scientific Barbarian. Keep in mind that I did an edit on, I've done an edit on just about everything Jim's done for Mutant Crawl Classics. And I read Mutant Claw Classics when it was still in its manuscript form. So, having read it and even been involved in conversations of how to handle this or how to handle that, it's editing is proofreading and making sure the sentences have a logical content and make sense. And having read all of Mutant Crawl Classic, having now edited several pieces of Jim's stuff, having played Gamma World, having played Metamorphosis Alpha back in the day, I have a fair grasp of the genre. And doing the Barbarian's a boatload of fun because I've been writing articles for it myself, and I get to read all the other stuff. And I read it both as I'm proofreading it and I'm editing it, and I'm making sure the sentences make sense. And if they don't, I send it back to Jim with a little question mark in the post-it note thing that we do with PDFs, going, what's he trying to say here? Or I'll rewrite a sentence or two and say, is this what he's trying to get across? It's great fun. I have seen one of Skeeter Green's after the fact, and it's more the same. It's fun, and it's more the post-apocalyptic mindset, and more monsters and whatever. Now, this brings me to something that I've never quite understood, and I'll fault myself for it, not being able to. I've never understood why fantasy role players or post-apocalyptic role players or sci-fi role players, why they have to keep having more monsters and more monsters and more monsters, new monsters. When I look at the proliferation of monsters in various monster manuals in D&D, I gotta think that those are in there for people with no imagination. Just my opinion, but I'll explain. Oh golly, I used the drow once. What can I use now? Oh gee, the last time they were outdoors, I chased them around with a boulet. What now? Now this is a completely personal vibe here, the way I've played since forever. I can give you, as an example, I published something with Eldritch, Snake Riders of the Arredondo. To go get it on Drive-Thru RPG, by the way. We're not making money on it anymore, but that's fine. Anyway, in it, I took natural things and basically just exaggerated them a little bit. I took caiman, and I took carnivorous apes and snakes, and I made some frogs oversized. And I never get tired of doing easy, simple stuff like that. I never get tired of using orcs or goblins. If I'm going to use something more powerful or more esoteric or exotic, fine, it's got to have a reason. There has to be a reason for it to be there. I'm completely and totally happy. I could go on writing adventure modules until I die, using nothing but what's in the Monster Manual, first edition. I don't need I don't need the Monster of the Month. Now I know. I did that, and Dragon Magazine did that for a while. But we started doing that before, around the time of Monster Manual coming out, And I did it at Dragon to cash in on this desire that I prefaced this with. I don't understand. I did it as a marketing tool. People want new monsters. Okay. All right. I don't understand it, but I'm glad to sell them to them. And I know that Jim and Skeeter are making up new stuff. Now, I can forgive it and understand it a little better in post-apocalyptic because you don't have a wide bestiary to draw upon from myth and folklore, just from the sci-fi that's been written about it. But by the same token, I could take ordinary stuff and mutate them in 6 different ways and have essentially 6 different monsters. But okay, if that's what you want, if you want lots of a variety, that's fine. One argument in favor of it is the fact that players learn that, oh, that's a so-and-so, it'll have somewhere in this range of hit points and its armor class is. So in the sense of giving the players new challenges that they don't already have memorized, okay. But by the same token, who says that carnivorous ape has to have X number of hit points? Mine are on steroids. Or it might have been sick and they're puny. Doesn't have to be by the book in this regard every time. I don't think so. Now, I had one positive comment on the goat. So, this is for her. A 3-scream salute. That's just for you, Donna. And this is a Total Con thing. We've been doing things about sheep and goats for years now at Total Con, many of which are obscene. Anyway, I really missed going to Total Con this year. That was the last con I attended in person last year. But I did run a couple of games, and I was able to make Jay's party Zoom, and that was nice seeing some old friends. At least I got to see them and hear their voice. But I'm getting my second shot on March 5th. And then 2 weeks after that, I'm supposed to be good. So I'm looking forward and planning on going to one or more cons in the fall or in the winter. Now, here, this comment is so far from out of left field, I decided I'd address it. This is obviously a very specialized campaign. Every campaign reflects the tastes, the likes, and the dislikes of the person creating it. If the person creating it is a painter, fine art type painter, then their campaigns are going to have probably more lush type of descriptions. You're going to have a better image of what you're seeing and whatever, because that's what I'm guessing would happen. If you're into animal husbandry, well, you're going to have a lot of interesting animal. The interests of the DM are going to flavor, to one degree or another. That's just human nature. They're going to flavor the campaign. So I'm guessing that this person is a musician or a frustrated musician or a wannabe musician. I picture musical instruments having an ego too. One item, if played, forces the user to sing the bitter truth at the most effective times. Another forces its player to sing about future events like a fortune teller. They seem to function as normal for most of the time, but the performance is of masterpiece quality when the ego is at work. Well, I can only assume that the DM is musically oriented, plays one or more instruments, writes music, whatever. Or they're playing in a really interesting campaign based on the Music Man. 76 trombones. And two of the trombones are rebels, and they don't, I don't know. I can see putting these powers or these coercions on other items and having a lot of fun. It would be really fun to have something that's really great, and all of a sudden you're being questioned and you're forced to tell the truth. You don't know why, but you are compelled. Or all of a sudden go into a trance and make future predictions. I could see that being a lot of fun, having some fun with that. But see, I'm all about fun. I'm not real serious. And so therefore, some people. Anyway. Now, this is a comment that I am not exactly sure I understand. Cave Farmer's Journal, page 628 reads, well, there's no Cave Farmer's Journal that I'm aware of, and certainly if there was, I'll bet it wouldn't have 600 and some pages. Dwarven ale made by brewmaster can ignite a flame, so drink at your own risk. Player, I take a sip. DM, it tastes. Oh, I'm sorry, bad punctuation. It tastes spicy and burns. Now roll for poison damage or lose a point of constitution permanently. What the hell? We'll go back to this again. That sounds rather adversarial and kind of a screw job to the players. Come on. We'll come back to that, why I think it's a screw job. All right, next one. Mindflayers scary? Not necessarily. They're just a bunch of squid head mutants, man. When I get around to writing a game setting, a short story, or novel I'm working on based on the very first D&D games I witnessed, was only 9 years old, too young to play, in 1980, which ran Gary Gygax's epic TSR series of the modules G1, G3 through G3 in the Drow, and that's the D1, D3s. I'll write about the legends of the Orc Chieftain Far Toll, the multi-class Orc Barbarian Shaman Chieftain, and the rest of the adventures eventually conquered them all and made calamari fish stew out of the Coatoans and all the rest of those illithid Mind Flayer Cthulhu monster MFers, and celebrated their victory over the Underdark in a massive seafood banquet. Yeah, I don't expect I'll be seeing this anytime soon. Unless you get a gig writing a comedy for one of the apps or one of the networks. G1, G2, and G3 were great. They were the first ones we did and some of the best, I still think. The Drow were good too. I didn't have anything to do with that, not even play tested it. Now, the multi-class Orc Barbarian Shaman Chieftain, that wasn't anything in 1980. Whatever. Yeah, believe me, if you don't take mind flares seriously, if they're used correctly, they ought to just scare the shit out of you. Because without psionics, you ain't got a snowball's chance in hell. All the tinfoil hats in the world aren't going to help. I'm reading a book right now. It makes me think of this. And they keep referring to something called fine mail. And they line cloaks with it. And it doesn't weigh very much, but it's very, very thin and very, very strong. and so you can't get a shiv in the ribs or whatever. Man, that'd make a hell of a cloak to find somewhere. There's your defense plus, +2 regular, +4 against missiles or pointed object. Whoa, wouldn't be any good against rocks, but it would stop arrows and swords. Neat idea. Well, I've found a new colossal. We're on to a new topic here. I found a new colossal time sink. I don't know what it is about us civilization players, but we can't seem to resist the latest iteration. I'm now on 6, and I'm enjoying it. I don't understand it much yet because I'm not one for doing a lot of tutorials or reading a lot of rules. I kind of like to go in and muck about until I figure it out. It's a good game. It's a lot of fun, though. Now I'm going into a freeform screed rant lecture. I've been noticing, I do pay attention. I look at a lot of threads in that. There's a disturbing quality in D&D right now. Very disturbing. And it doesn't seem to be limited to any given editions. And it seems as though in far too many games and campaigns that it has become a PCs versus the DM antagonistic, us against them. What the fuck? What happened to trust? What alerted me was a fairly wordy and filled with silly response post on Facebook about rolling behind a screen and how all roles should be out in the open. And that way, it's like if you're a DM and you roll behind the screen, you might be cheating, and it's assumed you are. Believe me, I bought Outdoor Survival because the book said I could use it. I said, bullshit, and saw the value of the board, nice hard, cardboard stock, heavy, thick board that you could sit up like this and put all your stuff behind. The main reason for a screen is to keep your maps hidden. I'm not allowed to hide my maps. I've seen this argument going both ways, to be fair. And I just do not understand the persistence of this. We're being cheated. We have to know. We need to know. I've seen good reasons to roll behind the screen. Number one, you roll behind the screen so that it takes them a while to figure out that thing that so many people hate called THAC0. Okay, if you know your THAC0 and you roll a certain number and you don't hit, then okay, it's a certain, it's a certain level of armor. If you roll the first time and hit, you have no idea how well armored or what the armor factor is of the object or opponent you're striking. See the die roll and you do. That's too much information for the players. I'm really at a loss to understand how this has come about. For 5 years, I helped promote, well, more than that with my other magazines and stuff. For many, many, many years, I have promoted the idea that role-playing is a collective group engagement activity We're all here to have a good time. Now, I'm appalled at how many people seem to think that the DM's idea of a good time is killing their characters. Hardest thing a DM has to deal with is when a TPK occurs. And believe me, there's a lot of TPKs that get fudged so that they don't occur when a group of players do something colossally stupid. Or, to put it more mildly, colossally ill-advised. I'd be willing to bet, and of course we'll never be able to resolve the bet, but I'd be willing to bet a lot of money that on die rolls that have been fudged by DMs, the vast majority have been fudged in favor of the group, not against them. It is my opinion that sadistic DMs don't run more than a couple, 3 adventures or sessions, and the player's going, screw this, I'm not going to go roll up a new character every week. In the past, there have been anecdotal stories about DMs laughing when they kill your character and tearing up your sheet, and and Jolly. Once again, I use Jolly Blackburn in the Knights of the Dinner Table. Crutch does that. He's brutal. You die in his crime game, Crime Boss, I think it's called. And not only that, he takes your picture and you can't get back into the table for so many weeks. I just, I can't see anybody playing more than a couple times with somebody like that if they exist. It's not supposed to be an adversarial relationship. I've now run my Wheel of Blame a bunch of times online. The people have paid me to do it, and I've run it dozens of times for conventions, and in the past year, probably close to a dozen times online. And I tell everybody at the beginning, hey, we're here, we're gonna have a good time. We're hanging the we're framing a good time with D&D, but we're here to have fun. And the way I run the game is that because we have to have trust online, I can't see their die rolls. And by the same token, if I'm rolling for them and the rolls are crummy, they're going to feel a little uneasy. So in my Wheel of Blame, the players roll, and I have to trust them. They roll their initiative dice. They roll their to hits. If they do damage, they roll how much damage they do. If they get hit, they roll how much damage they get. Because the whole underlying semi-humorous theme of the Wheel of Blame is it's not my fault. You have to get a little token that says that to get off the Wheel of Blame. It's not my fault. I'm going to see which way I need to move here. Oh, now you can see both hands. Okay. And the only thing I roll is I roll for the monsters to hit initiative. And that's it. I have to trust them as they have to trust me. The only thing I roll is, did I hit you? I arbitrarily assign damage. They set off a big explosion. Everybody takes 2 points a hit and to their hearing, and their hearing's going to be reduced for probably possibly the remainder of the game, which may or may not factor in later when they do or don't hear something creeping up on them. I don't see it as adversarial. We're all there to have a good time. Not trusting the DM, I think, is sacrilege. Why are you playing with them if you don't trust them? Any DM that knows the game at all can cheat the players if they want to. Why? Why risk not having your players come back? It's not an adversarial relationship, with the possible exception of an elimination tiered tournament. Possibly, in that the judge is there to score that group and their performance, and if the judge feels, it used to be very subjective. The judge just didn't like their style of play, they might not go on. Then we did the modules and came up with scoring systems. But if you don't trust your DM, find a different one or quit playing, because you're just giving yourself grief. You're just tying yourself in knots for no good reason. There has to be trust between the players and the DM. I could not imagine being such an untrusting DM that I have to record every hit, all that. I trust the players to do that. Who are they cheating but themselves? Who's the DM cheating but himself and the players? I get just as much satisfaction and pleasure out of watching a combat unfold as I would. Well, I can't see having more fun if I cheated. Granted, I used to have, I was known for about 6 years, probably thereabouts, for a huge number, starting when I came, it would have started probably in 7 or 8 when I started running games at cons. I TPK'd everybody because, number one, I was writing them too tough for the adventurers, the pre-gens, even though they were good pre-gens, not the ones I used in the wheel, but much more accomplished ones with items and possessions and what have you. But I was too unforgiving, too harsh. Oh, sorry, you woke up the lich, you're dead. I mellowed a little. Friends cautioned me that I should. And so there came the universal antidote, which cures anything, sticks heads back on necks, arms back on torsos, legs back on hips, whatever. And you died, you were dumb, but you were saved, and probably you'll play a much smarter, more chastened game as we go on. No, you don't have to leave the table after 40 minutes. But I didn't set out to kill them. I set out overestimating their common sense and good sense. Found out after a couple of years, as my reputation grew, that people were looking for gory, hideous deaths so they could go home and tell their buddies, oh, yeah, I died in one of Kask games. Oh, it was wonderful. Okay. You're looking to get your ticket punched to Valhalla. But I never saw it as adversarial. Never did. The adversary is the dungeon and the traps and the tricks and the thought puzzles and the mind bombs that I put in there. Why would I need to fudge dice? In any event, next week I get my second shot. In the meantime, that's all I got to talk about tonight. Think about it. If you can't trust your DM, why are you showing up? It's not us versus them. It is us versus them. Us includes the DM. Them is the adventure, the stuff that's already been prepared. And the DM just sits back and lets it happen. Or not, depending upon the skill and foresight and insight of the players. Okay, we're done. No more lecture. 3 weeks. Yeah, I guess it'll be about 3 weeks. I'll be running games for Gary Con. I'll be running one every evening. And somehow they all got put into the top tier, which means if you don't have the top tier ticket, you'll have to wait and see how many slots are left open. There has to be a minimum of 4, and there's a maximum of 7. With less than 4 players, the game just doesn't last very long, and it's not as much fun. More than 7, and it's unmanageable in its present format. And it is a chance to play in the game and not pay extra like you would otherwise, or not. I don't care. I got a game coming up in, I think, Okinawa. Can't wait for that. Okay, weather's warming up. Basement's getting colder. But come summer, it'll be nice and cool down here while it's sweltering outside. Wear a mask, social distance, get your shots when you can. Sneeze into your elbow. Wash those hands. Seriously, double mask. I wear a paper surgical mask and I wear a cloth mask on the outside. Doesn't feel any different. Actually, the cloth mask holds the paper mask in place better. Stay safe. Dodata Gobi. Oh, hello. I'm still figuring out when this thing starts. Welcome to my cellar.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs. Still quite a feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Last man around when them rates went down. Calling Gary in that Lake Geneva town. Hey Gary, it's an awful mess. Let me edit, we'll have success. D&D and Dragon Magazine.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Magic missile, it's a mortar shell. Make it hit in the first level spell. Brought psionics to the game to attack that wizard's brain. ESR and fantasy, collection of micro armory. Titan with tramp under a tree, high as could be.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Curmudgeon.